Hello, everyone, and welcome to the I'm a Coconut podcast. My name is Amrit Shenava, and I'm your host. And in today's episode of the podcast, I will be talking about why I'm a radical optimist. And I know this is something quite new I'm doing. Like, if you look at the logo of the I'm a Coconut podcast, it's basically written philosophy. And I mostly want to basically make this podcast in a way where I talk about things from a rational, logical standpoint, as in why we should be more logical in the things we do. And I don't know if that makes sense for you folks yet, but philosophy is all about how we think, why we think. And I think setting some framework would help our listeners a lot. And what I mean by radical optimist is basically I will be going over why I'm extremely optimistic about the future and why I love to think in a way that's completely different from how society works. So basically, for me, I've always believed the purpose of my life is to basically advance humanity forward. And basically, I have three missions on how this is possible. Number one, trying to save the world. Now, we obviously have seen the COVID pandemic. It was quite disastrous. It was quite tragic for some people because a lot of families were devastated by it. Many people lost their jobs. Some people lost their lives. And it has affected lots of things in the process. And when situations like these happen, like a calamity, a pandemic, a disaster, you feel like I want to take the initiative. I want to do something and save the world. That's number one. Number two is changing the world. In 2007, I believe it was September, when Steve Jobs came out in Cupertino, unveiled this device that basically combined the power of a phone, the power of an iPod, and I think the power of the web browser on your device. And people, when you showed iPhone for the first time, it changed the way we think about certain things. Changing the world for the better, where humanity progresses forward. Again, that's what I mentioned at the beginning, the purpose of my life. That's the second mission. And the third one is basically making the world a happier place. I don't know how this basically happens. I don't know a proper instance, but I wouldn't consider my podcast as an example because people from all over the globe listen to this podcast, and I get feedback that they feel a bit happy, they feel a bit relieved. Of course, I feel that I can improve on this podcast. Now, why am I talking about radical optimist and talking about humanity progressing forward? We're living in times where there have been a lot of negativity. You just open the news, you would hear some people like literally shouting, talking, and it's like you won't get the feeling of happiness. You're like, I want some piece of information, something I want to know about that happened in the world in the past few weeks, the past few months. What's going on? But you open the news and they're just constantly arguing with each other, going from one side to the other, telling that I'm wrong, you're wrong, I'm correct. It's just that game. It's like completely garbling of words, like lots of jargon. And again, with the pandemic that happened, it was quite disastrous. There's so many things. People were so worried. Is the world going to end? Is this the end of humanity? So at times like these, it's more important to be a radical optimist. And this is a mindset I implicate myself with those three missions that drives me to do what I do. So I want to talk about what I did. So initially, when the COVID pandemic hit India, the second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic, I think it was around May 2021 when the situation got much worse. And there was a time when there was a lack of resources like medical supply, oxygen tanks, remdesivir, it's like an injection that's used. There was a shortage of blood donors, like plasma donors. It was extremely chaotic, I would say. And many people were losing hope. And on top of that, we had scammers who was basically utilizing this need. Like, they were trying to manipulate the needs of people. Like, they were trying to claim to be folks who had these resources when really they did not. They just knew that people would pay anything to buy it because it was that much needed at the time. And at that time, I felt a sense of responsibility. We know that this can stop if we take the initiative ourselves. So I was optimistic at the time. I was optimistic that I could do something about it, that I could make change in society, bring about a change in society. And many people disagree with me over here. Like, what can you do? You're just nobody. You don't even live in India. But at that time, I strongly believed in being a radical optimist. Where I basically, I at the time was building a website and I wanted to learn React, but I was just procrastinating. But that moment, I learned React. In 12 hours, I built and launched a website. And trust me, that website just hit like around 1 million users in just like less than 24 hours. After launch. And at that time, I knew that it doesn't matter who you are, where you are, As long as you have the fire in you, as long as you're optimistic about something, you can go for it. Like, I just shoot my shot and I did it. We were able to save a lot of lives. We had a lot of volunteers back then on ground who were basically verifying all the leads coming through. And with that said, there was one instance in my life where I feel that radical optimism helped a lot. There was another instance with Flashmates. Like, this is a website I never expected to build. Like, for folks who are listening to this podcast the first time, Flashmates is basically a website I built to help students find affordable off-campus housing and roommates. So the problem is that students let's say if you're coming from India to the US for the first time, and if it's your first trip to the US, of course you'll be quite confused, obfuscated, flustered about the entire process. You'll be like, where am I going to stay? Are there houses where I can find roommates with whom I can actually have a good time to spend with? The problem is that there's many flawed websites, and there was no proper way through which you can find housing and roommates. And I would still say it's challenging. And at that time, I decided, why not we build our own platform through which we can solve this problem? You can actually find housing based on your interest and preference, and you can find roommates and matching you with someone who basically has the same interest as you. And that's when I launched Flashmates. I had no clue that this can actually bring a massive change, because at that time, I just wanted to solve a problem for myself, because many students were just like, I won't say they were pessimistic, but they did not know how to go with the problem. So I became a radical optimist at the time. I really wanted to fix this problem. I wanted to change it. And that's when I decided to build Flashmates. It's been over more than 18 months. And so far, it's been going super good. And till date, Flashmates has helped around 10,000 students from across the globe to find housing and roommates. So being a radical optimist is very, very important for humanity, because that's the way you can actually bring about a change, save the world. Steve Jobs is a radical optimist. He doesn't care about what the world thinks about him. Like, he wants to basically do something through which he can push humanity forward. And one of the reasons I talk about pushing humanity forward, there's a thing called Pioneer Tournament. It's basically a tournament where ambitious outsiders, as per the website claims, they come together, they compete on building a project, and people vote on it every week. Flashmates is a part of the tournament, and I think it has been quite helpful. And that motto, like helping the ambitious outsiders to push and progress humanity forward, resonates with me when I talk about radical optimists, because humanity, like if you take a look 100 years back, if you take a look at the aircraft, if you take a look how clothing was, things were completely different. Humanity will keep progressing forward. The only way we bring about a change in society is to be extremely optimistic about the future, to look at change as a constant. Like, change is constant. It's not going to basically stop. Humanity will keep on evolving. Humanity will keep on progressing. For that, we have to be receptive to change. As in, we have to be very positive. We have to be optimistic about the change. Like, people will be like, I'm going to use a certain method for this approach. Like, I'm going to use this approach to solve this problem. But again, a new approach is going to come, and you will have to use that. Like, let's say in 1993, when the internet first came out, the problem is that people were like, why use the web browser? Why use the internet? Because to better explain this, there was a time when people used to listen to baseball games on radio. And I remember there was an interview, I think it was David Letterman and Bill Gates. And David Letterman is basically telling Bill Gates that, why do I basically have to go to the internet just to listen to a baseball game? I can literally do that on radio. And at that time, many people were not basically optimistic about the future of the internet. Well, I don't know if anyone's using radio now, but I do know that a lot of people are using the internet for a lot of stuff. Like, many trillion-dollar companies have been born out of the internet. And I think that's the same that's happening right now with Web3, with crypto. Many people are extremely bearish on it. And bearish is basically the concept used where you're not optimistic about something. You basically don't believe in it. And I strongly believe Web3, crypto, NFTs will change that thing. And I want to make a side note here. This is just my personal opinion and perception. Yours might differ, and that's completely fine. I just want to talk about what I think about certain topics. So, all in all, I just want to say that being a radical optimist is very important. If you want to change the world, if you want to save the world and to make this world a happy place, change is very important. Traditional approaches will not work. They have an expiry date, and they will expire after a while. So keep on building, keep on changing the world. At the end, the mission is always the same. to progress humanity forward. We're going to